Hello, my friends. There was the serious meeting today happened in Paris, the coalition of the willing and Ukraine. There was the President Zelensky and leaders of European Union countries and obviously UK. We have some of the really good news coming from this meeting, but I'm gonna tell you them later in this video, so bear with me. But first of all, here I want to say the reaction of Washington, because Donald Trump participated in the meeting as well, but through virtual connection. It was a video conference with all of those leaders and Trump. And you know what? It didn't go well at all. Donald Trump is accusing Europe and Ukraine, I guess, in this case, for continuation of the war. Axios report about it built as well, so Trump puts onus on Europe to pressure Putin in Ukraine. In this article, Trump says that Europe is purchasing Russian fuels and gas, so in a way it supports a Russian military economy. Yeah, obviously it's bad that Europe continued to do it, it's the well-known fact, but it tries to cut dependence on the Russian energy supplies. Basically, if Europe cuts everything now, the European economy will go in stagnation because it needs resources after all, and the United States liquid gas is not enough to compensate all of those losses. So maybe in the future, Qatar pipeline might help Europe to be less dependent on Russia. But here I actually agree that it's bad that they continue to purchase Russian oil and gas, especially those countries as Slovakia and Hungary. And you might remember this list from Viktor Orban, Hungarian leader, where he complained that Ukraine strikes Russian oil supplies to his country, but instead of blaming Viktor Orban for purchasing Russian oil, here Donald Trump said that, oh, I am very angry about it, so tell Slovakia you are my great friend. So Donald Trump's friends actually may purchase Russian oil and gas, but not friends of Donald Trump, they cannot. Axios also stated that conversation was really hard, it was intense, they were arguing with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump seriously pushed Europe. He also said that Europe should apply sanctions or tariffs on China. By the time Donald Trump himself backtracked those huge tariffs from China, saying that it harms American economy. Oh wow, so he wants European economy to get hurt in this case. I guess so. According to reports from Axios and Bild, this guy was really unhinged during that conference. Trump understands that he is not able to finish this war, which creates global instability, but he promised to finish it in 24 hours later, in 100 days, and now we don't know, 2 weeks, maybe again 2 weeks. And because Donald Trump is the narcissist psycho, he's just looking for someone to blame too. And whom to blame? Okay, Putin is my friend, I deal very good with Putin. Let's blame those European bureaucrats for purchasing Russian oil and for, not applying sanctions on China and extra sanctions and tariffs on India. Let's say that they support this war, they don't want it to be finished. Then in fact, Donald Trump himself didn't apply any sort of the sanctions which he promised many of the times on Russia, on Putin. He said, I'm not happy about Putin, but at the same time he says I am friends with Putin. Like, what? Then again, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Every time he says about this stuff, he's like this broken record, Ukraine situation is not accepted him as some sort of the priority for United States of America in global politics. No, he still treats it as some sort of the local conflict. He thought that he can manage to handle it very fast, but no, he was mistaken, but he never ever recognizes his mistakes. And I'm sure that on this conference, Donald Trump blames Zelensky because Zelensky later on after the conference said that there is no chance for him to go to Moscow and meet with Putin. So probably Donald Trump heard what Putin said in China, where he said that Zelensky is not a legitimate leader, but we can meet if he really wants. Maybe Zelensky may go to Moscow. That's the only place actually where Putin wants to meet Zelensky, just to humiliate Ukrainian leader. But Zelensky understands that, and there were tons of the proposals to meet in a neutral territory, Switzerland, even Budapest is okay, I guess, in this case. So as Donald Trump wanted this to happen, right, the meeting between Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Istanbul, where Ukraine sent the high officials and Russia sent just clowns who mean nothing in Russian political or any sort of the life. With Medinsky as a representative there, it was just humiliation of this entire meeting. Basically, it is the meeting for meeting. It was proposal, by the way, from Russia to continue Istanbul negotiations, where Russia again demanded for Ukraine to give up its territories for Russia without any fights, basically capitulation. The Ukrainian delegation refused to go there, but after all agreed because Ukraine didn't want to mess up with Donald Trump. After all, he is an elected president of the United States, which is the shame of the United States. It's my personal opinion. And you know what Donny posted after today's meeting with Europeans almost right away? Yes, his photo with Putin. I'm here with Putin. You are out there in Paris and I'm here with Putin. We had wonderful, fantastic meeting with those planes flying. Look how mighty American army is. That's the clear message with whom Donny tries to team up. Again, it's not the threat of Putin as many of the MAGA community representatives say that, oh, Donny showed the mighty force to threaten the Russian dictator. No, it was just an air show to meet and greet the Russian dictator. Like, for example, it happened the day before yesterday. Donald Trump met with Polish president. There were also airplanes flying. It was filmed. So was it a threat from the United States or from Donny to the Polish president Nawrocki? Absolutely not. It is a meet and greet. Also in American football, it is happening regularly. Then American Air Force is out there greeting people. So yes, it was definitely a sincere greetings with clappings from Donny with Air Force and all of the show out there in Anchorage, Alaska. Just for you to understand with whom we are dealing here. Guys, the United States is more and more isolated from Europe if we speak about economy, if we speak about security, and there is less and less military support. He only wants to deal with those governments who have Trump's-like ruling system. For example, Hungary, Slovakia, they're very close in their spirit. You may call it far right or something, but yeah, it is like that mainly. But it's really hard to call Donny even far right. He created idiocracy out there in the White House, and the more I watch this shit show, guys, the more sad I am about what could happen potentially, judging on the world events and the threats to democratic world. And this is the article from Bild. Mainly it's the same as in Axios, but here they say that Europeans understood that they shouldn't rely on the United States in applying more sanctions on Russia. So United States will not apply those sanctions, promised multiple of the times by Donald Trump. 2 weeks will continue forever. So they decided not to count on United States in that economic pressure potentially created on Russia. No, it will not happen. But Donald Trump implemented 10% of the tariffs on Ukrainian products when he implemented the stuff on the European countries as well, A country whose economy mainly was ruined by Russia with all of those long-range strikes and drones. Now let's just tax them more with those tariffs. Plus, all of the weapons which United States is selling to Ukraine, it also has 10% extra. I think I already told you about it in one of my videos that that is how United States want to cover the transportation costs, which are live out there. You have the bills from logistics from those companies, airplanes, they mostly hire private companies, and Ukraine has its own cargo company, Antonov Airlines. So here's just pure earning on war, and Ukraine taxed 2 times, 10% on its products and 10% then Europeans Europeans taxed here buy American weapons for Ukraine. Unhinged. All right, more or less it is understandable with Donald that we shouldn't expect anything good from the current White House administration. I hope there will be the new one in 2028. But here Europeans, they continue to speak about security guarantees for Ukraine, which unfortunately could be implemented only after ceasefire. So there is division actually between those European countries. Some countries, they hesitate to send their military forces or instructors at all, like for example Poland and Germany also recently say that no, we're not gonna send our forces there. Instead, they want to boost Ukrainian military support with arms, but I think they'll change their rhetorics. So there are the countries like that even if the ceasefire is out there, we're not gonna send our forces. Okay, it is quite risky, we're afraid of Putin. The second variant is then the countries send their forces to Ukraine, instructors with the Russian coordination. As for me, it is nonsense. Russia would never agree on that, but they say, like their country officials, they say like that, we're gonna send our forces to Ukraine if it is coordinated with Russia as the part of security or ceasefire agreement. Basically, blah, blah, blah would put them to the first group. They will not send their forces. Russia would never agree on that. And the third type of the countries like France and UK, I guess that they are willing to send their forces, instructors, and maybe even soldiers after the ceasefire, no matter what Russia says. Well, it brings us to the interesting situation that for Russia, it is not profitable in this case to ceasefire at all, because there could be some of the international and NATO forces deployed in Ukraine, potentially creating risks for the confrontation between Russia and NATO in Ukraine, like real confrontation, despite what Russian propaganda says, that they fight NATO in Ukraine. No, it's not happening like that. Ukraine just obtains weapons, but that deployment could potentially spark that real confrontation. And in that case, Russia obviously loses, because they will not be able to mobilize their society for this big war in a very short term. Well, at least Ukraine, they will lose in case of this big general confrontation, which I think actually could happen. But Russians, they said well before that they will never agree on NATO forces deployments, and still we see how weak in general European politicians are. Yeah, they continue to support Ukraine with military, but in their own military actions, they're afraid. They're afraid to escalate, they're afraid of Russia. We clearly see it. And let's assume that there is the ceasefire. Okay, Europe deploy its forces, like France, come on, United Kingdom and some different countries who are also willing to deploy their forces. But Putin may say, okay, we're on the ceasefire, but we do not expect any sort of the NATO deployment. So if you deploy your forces, there's going to be a confrontation between Russia and the European countries. We're going to send our drones, we're going to send our missiles, so they'll threat Europe, and Ukraine may stay alone with its army against Russia for the next stage of the full-scale intervention coming from Russia. So there is the possible scenario of this as well. If Europe afraid right now to deploy their forces, it means that it would be afraid next, even if the ceasefire happens. But we have some of the interesting news. Yeah, I promise you good news coming from Ukraine after this meeting. So Starmer, Prime Minister of United Kingdom, announced a readiness to supply Ukraine with long-range missiles to strike deep inside Russia, revealed at Paris Coalition of the Willing Summit. So I think it's not just the UK, I think it will be other countries. However, they do not specify particular types of missiles which could be supplied to Ukraine. I hope it will be also towers which Germany may send to Ukraine. So those news are awesome, but again, it might take many more months before Ukraine obtains those missiles. And what kind of those could be, well, we'll see. For now, Ukraine is also focused on its own long-range missile productions. I already showed you in my previous video the result of the Ukrainian Flamingo missile strike on Russian FSB avantpost. So Ukraine has to work more on precision of those missiles. So hopefully, altogether, Ukraine will have new tools to hit Russian refineries. By the way, right now, while I'm recording this video, I had the information that Russian refinery in Ryazan was hit. I already have images. I'm going to tell you more details about that one in the next video. And guys, please check out my channel. You may subscribe for it to get updated, because there I post regularly. For example, my last video 10 hours ago was about frontline update. And yesterday I spoke about the global threat coming from China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Yeah, the threat obviously not for those countries, but for our democratic world. And my friends, you may also support me on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description just below. And as always, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.